नमस्सर्वेभ्यः व्योम-संस्कृत-पाठशालायाः लघुसिद्धान्तकौमुदी द्वितीयभागे ऊनविंशे वाग्वर्धिनी वर्गे सर्वेषां स्वागतम्। येनाक्षरसमाम्नायमधिगम्य महेश्वरात् कृत्स्नं व्याकरणं प्रोक्तं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः। वाक्यकारं वररुचिं भाष्यकारं पतञ्जलिं पाणिनिं सूत्रकारं च प्रणतोऽस्मि मुनित्रयम्। नत्वा सरस्वतीं देवीं शुद्धां गुण्यां करोम्यहं पाणिनीयप्रवेशाय लघुसिद्धान्तकौमुदीम्। आदौ एव क्षमां याचे। गतसप्ताहस्य वाग्वर्धिनीवर्गः सकृत् व्याक्षिप्तः पुनरपि तस्य तदापि कर्तुं न शक्तवती. So I'm very sorry, especially for the last minute notice on Monday. So all of us were not well, a fever running through the household. I was hoping I would get well and be able to do the class, but couldn't do it. So what we will do is, Adya Prathamaha Vagvardhini Vargaha Bhavishyati Saptamadhyayasya Adau Chaturnam Pathanam Punaha Agrima Saptahe Dvitiyaha Vagvardhini Vargaha. We are lagging behind by 1 week. So we will do the second Vagvardhini next week. Agrima Saptahe Abhyasa Vargaha Nasti. Yatohi Abhyasa Vargadvayam Jatam. Maya Aswasthya Karanena Asya Saptahasya Nutana Drishyamshaha api Mudritum na Shaktaha. So there are no new uploads this week. There will only be the small test for the second chunk 7.5 to 7.8. And next Friday we will have the second Vagvardhini for this chapter. From next Friday again we will resume the third week's uploads. Idanim arambham kurmaha ashtadhyayi. अष्टाध्याय्याम् अस्माभिः अस्मिन् पर्याये सप्तमाध्यायस्य द्वितीयः पादः अधीयमानः अस्ति। प्रथमाध्यायस्य प्रथमः पादः एवं सप्तमाध्यायस्य प्रथमः पादः अधीतः। तत्र सप्तमाध्यायस्य द्वितीयपादं यदा पश्यामः तत् किमर्थमिदं चितम् इति किञ्चित् वक्तुम् इच्छामि। यतोहि केचन लिखितवन्तः अत्र आदौ विशिष्य सूत्राणि दीर्घाणि सन्ति किञ्चित् क्लिष्टानि अपि सन्ति इति। वस्तुतः तेन कारणेनैव चितः अयं पादः। सप्तमाध्यायस्य द्वितीयपादस्य आदौ इडागम प्रकरणं विद्यते. So a major section of this pada is concerned with idagama. Tatra nedvashīkriti iti ashtamam sutram yadasti. Atra itaha arabhya till beyond 70 sutras, they are all concerned with idagama. Idagamascha subanta prakarane nopayujyate. Vastutaha tinganta prakarane kridanta prakarane eva tasya upayogaha adhikaha bhavati. Yatohi tatra vayam janimah idanim pathishyati iti bhavati, kintu drishyadhatuh asti chet drakshyati. इकारः न श्रूयते. यत्र यत्र इकारः श्रूयते धातोः परस्य कस्यचित् प्रत्ययस्य, सः तिङ् प्रत्ययः वा भवतु कृत् प्रत्ययः वा भवतु, यत्र धातोः परं विद्यमानस्य प्रत्ययस्य इकारः श्रूयते सः इट् इति उच्यते. इट् इति आगमः, प्रत्ययस्य विहितः आगमः. वयं जानीमः टित् आगमः अस्ति, अतः आदौ विधीयते. प्रत्ययस्य आदौ विधीयते, अतः इ तुम् अस्ति चेत् इतुम् इति भवति, त्वा अस्ति चेत् इत्वा इति भवति. एवं प्रत्ययस्य आदौ इडागमः भवति. इडागम प्रकरणं क्लिष्टमेव. बहवः तत्र इडागमे क्लेशम् अनुभवन्ति, यतोहि सूत्रं विना सूत्रक्रमं विना तत्र क्लेशः भवति. तदनन्तरं सुबन्त प्रक्रिया सम्बद्धानि अपि सूत्राणि सन्ति, किन्तु अग्रे वयं तिङन्तान् कृदन्तांश्च पठिष्यामः इति आशया अधुनैव किञ्चिदिव सिद्धतां कुर्मः इति मत्वा एव अयं पादः चितः। अत्र अङ्गकार्याणि सन्ति। आदौ प्रायः पादस्य अर्धभागः अग्रे उपयोगाय भविष्यति। तदनन्तरं तु अत्रापि उपयोगाय अङ्गकार्यविधायकानि सूत्राणि सन्ति। तत् कथं वा भवतु, छन्दोवत् सूत्राणि भवन्ति इत्यपि अस्ति। सूत्रपाठः एव अत्यन्तम् उपयोगाय भवति सर्वेषां वैयाकरणानाम्। अतः श्रद्धया अस्मिन् पर्याये सप्तमाध्यायस्य द्वितीयं पादं पठामः। अद्य अहं सकृत् पाठयामि। कोऽपि अनुवक्तुम् इच्छति चेत् हस्तम् उन्नयतु। मैथिली भगिनी।
नमस्ते भगिनी।
हाँ,
नमस्ते भगिनी।
नमस्ते। सिचिवृद्धिः परस्मैपदेषु
शुचिवृद्धिः परस्मैपदेषु शुचिवृद्धिः परस्मैपदेषु
अतोल्रान्तस्य अत्र दोषः
अतोल्रान्तस्य
वदव्रजहलन्तस्य अचः
वदव्रजहलन्तस्याचः वदव्रजहलन्त्यासचः
वदव्रजहलन्तस्याचः
वदव्रजहलन्त्यस्याचः वदव्रजहलन्तस्याचः
नेटि
नेटि नेटि
म्यन्तक्षण
ह्यन्तक्षण ह्यन्तक्षण
श्वसजागृ
श्वसजागृ श्वसजागृ
निष्वेदितां
निष्वेदितां निष्वेदितां
निष्व्येदितां
निष्वेदितां निष्वेदिताम्
ऊर्णोतेर्विभाषा
ऊर्णोतेर्विभाषा ऊर्णोतेर्विभाषा
अतो हलादेर्लघोः
अतो हलादेर्लघोः अतो हलादेर्लघोः
नेड्वशीकृति
नेट् वशीकृते नेट् वशीकृते
ति तु त्रत
ति तु त्रत ति तु त्रत
थसीसु
थसीसु थसीसु
सरकसेषु च
सरकसेषु च सरकसेषु च
तितुत्रत थसिसु सरकसेषु च
तितु त्रतत सिसु सरकसेषु च तितु त्रतत सिसु सरकसेषु च
एका च उपदेशेऽनुदात्तात्
एका च उपदेशे अनुदात्तात् एका च उपदेशे अनुदात्तात्
तत्र भङ्गः करणीयः इति नास्ति, उपदेशेऽनुदात्तात् इत्येव। एका च उपदेशेऽनुदात्तात्
एका च उपदेशे अनुदात्तात्
अकारः नापेक्षितः, पूर्वरूपसन्धिः अस्ति अत्र। अकारः
उपदेशेऽनुदात्तात् सम्यक् अस्ति वा? एका च उपदेशेऽनुदात्तात् एका च उपदेशेऽनुदात्तात्
श्र्युकः किते
श्रुखः किते श्रुखः किते
सनिग्रहगुहोश्च
सनिग्रहगुहोश्च सनिग्रहगुहोश्च
कृसृभृवृ
कृसृभृवृ कृसृभृवृ
स्तुद्रुसृश्रुवो लिटि
स्तुदृश्रुवो लिटि
स्तुद्रुसृश्रुवो लिटि
स्तुदृश्रुवो लिटि
स्रुवति स्तुद्रुसृ श्रुवो लिटि
स्तुदृ सृ तृ
श्रुवः स्तु द्रु सृ श्रु चत्वारः सन्ति
स्तु
स्तुद्रो
दृ श्रु स्त्रु श्रुवो लिटे स्तुदृ स्त्रु श्रुवो लिटे
श्वीदितो निष्ठायाम्
श्वीदितो निष्ठायां श्वीदितो निष्ठायां
यस्य विभाषा
यस्य विभाषा
आदितश्च
आदितश्च आदितश्च
विभाषा भावादिकर्मणोः
विभाषा भावादिकर्मणोः विभाषा भावादिकर्मणोः
क्षुब्धस्वान्त
शुद्धस्वान्त शुद्धस्वान्त
ध्वान्तलग्न
ध्वान्तलग्न ध्वान्तलग्न
म्लिष्टविरिब्ध
मिलिष्टविरिब्ध मिलिष्टविरिब्ध
फाण्टबाढानि
फाण्टबाडानि फाण्टबाडानि
मन्थ मनस्तमस्सक्ता विस्पष्ट
मन्त मनस्तमासक्ता विस्पष्ट मन्त मनस्तमासक्ता विस्पष्ट
स्वरानायासभृशेषु
स्वरानायासभृशेषु स्वरानायासभृशेषु
धृषिषसि वैयात्ये
दृशिषसि वैयात्ये दृशिषसि वैयात्ये
दृढस्थूलबलयोः
दृढस्थूलबलयोः दृढस्थूलबलयोः
प्रभौ परिवृढः
प्रभौ परिवृढः प्रभौ परिवृढः
सम्यक्
धन्यवादः भगिनी
अस्तु. So as you can see, this pada is a tongue twister, and it's a very, very, very good opportunity to fine tune our pronunciation. Whichever we want, if we want to practice the differentiation between sh and sh, talavya shakaraha, murdhanya shakaraha, atra yatha dhrushishasi, tasya sutrasya abhyasenaiva adau sh tataha sh. एवमेव श्रुकः किति इत्यत्र तालव्यशकारः अस्ति, किन्तु विभाषा म्लिष्ट इत्यादिषु मूर्धन्यशकारः. महाप्राणवर्णाः बहवः सन्ति. रेफ संयुक्ताक्षरं पुनश्च ऋकारः. अत्र विशिष्य अस्मिन् सूत्रे कृ सृ भृ वृ सर्वत्र ऋकारः अस्ति. स्तुद्रुसृश्रुवो लिटि अत्र दृ इति नास्ति, द्रु सृ श्रु इत्यत्र रेफः उकारः. The distinction between rikara and ru should be very, very clear. Kr sr bhr vr studru srushruvo liti. Punascha yadi ऋकारः अस्ति यथा अत्र स्वरानायासभृशेषु इति न वक्तव्यं. कृसृभृवृ इति तत्र emphasis न भवति. If there is ऋकार, you cannot emphasize, should not on the previous sutra. तत्तु अनचिच इत्यनेन अग्रे संयोगः अस्ति चेदेव तत्र द्वित्वं भवति, नो चेत् कृसृभृवृ इत्येव भवेत्. एवं उच्चारणस्य सूक्ष्माः अंशाः बहवः सन्ति अस्मिन् पादे. सावधानम् अभ्यासं कुर्वन्तु, भेतव्यं नास्ति, but you can use this as an opportunity to fine tune your pronunciation. अस्तु, अग्रे गच्छामः. लघु कौमुदीं ये पठितुम् इच्छन्ति
नमस्ते.
श्यामला रामचन्द्रन्, हाँ पठतु.
होडः हस्य दहस्यात् झलि पदान्ते च लिट् लिड् लिहौ लिहः लिड्भ्यां लिट्सु लिट्सु दादेर् धातोर्गः झलि पदान्ते चोपदेशे दादेर् धातोर्हस्य गः एकाचो बशो बश् जषन्तस्य द्वोः दात्वयवयस्यैकाचः जषन्तस्य बशो बश् से द्वे पदान्ते च धुक् धुग् दुहौ दुहः दुग्भ्याम दुक्षु
धन्यवादः. Sandeep Shah.
वा नमस्ते. वा द्रुह मोह श्नुह श्निहाम एषाम हस्य वा दो जली पदान्ते च दृक् दुक् दृक् दृक् दृट् दृढ् द्रुहौ द्रुहः दृग्भ्यां दृढ्भ्यां दृक्षु दृट्सु दृट्सु एवं मुक् मुक् इत्यादि धात्वादेः शः सः स्नुक् स्नुक् स्नुट् स्नुड् एवं स्निक् स्निक् स्निट् स्निड् विश्ववाट् विश्ववाड् विश्ववाहौ विश्ववाहः विश्ववाहं विश्ववाहौ इज्ञण संप्रसारणं यणस्थाने प्रयुज्यमानो य इक् स संप्रसारणं संज्ञः स्यात्. वा उठ पस्यवाह संप्रसारणम उठ संप्रसारणाच्च संप्रसारणादचि पूर्वरूपमेकादेशः एते दत्युट्सु इति वृद्धिः विश्ववहः इत्यादि.
सम्यक्.
थैंक यू. धन्यवाद.
अस्तु. अहं पाठानां सारांशं संक्षेपेण वदामि. ततः प्रश्नाः सन्ति चेत् प्रष्टुमर्हन्ति. आदौ एतेषु पाठेषु संशयाः सन्ति चेत् पृच्छन्तु. अग्रिमपाठेषु सन्ति चेदपि अग्रे समयः अस्ति चेत् वयं स्वीकर्तुं शक्नुमः. So we have started with the halanta prakarana. Right? So halanta shabdas. In halanta shabdas, there are a lot of karyas which happen, for the last hal. Right? So you have a hal varna at the end, which is interacting with the pratyaya. So maybe you would have watched the video which I had sent as a preparatory video for halanta shabdas. Right? So if we understand the patterns in the shabdas, it is much easier for us to later match them to sutras. Right? So usually there are only 4 different things or 4 variations that can happen for a shabda. Right? So we should always be very, very conscious of those sections always, right? So the first section is of course the sarvanama sthana, right? So sut anapumsakasya, as long as we are with pullingas and strilingas, the sarvanama sthana is a very important section. There can be karyas which are related to sarvanama sthana, and always within the sarvanama sthana the supratyaya is something special. Okay, mainly because the supratyaya gets deleted and we are left with a padanta usually remaining at that place. So the supratyaya tends to be different. There are also special karyas which are many times given specifically for supratyaya. Right? So sarvanama sthana, within that supratyaya is special. Then we have the major section is the padasamya, where we have the swadishu asarvanama sthane. So wherever there is a haladi pratyaya, we have the padasamya, and whatever is given for padanta will occur in those pratyayas. The fourth one, the remaining, is the bha samya. Right? So always yada yada vayam halanta shabdanam adhyanam kurmah, we should have these divisions very clear in the mind. It's very, very easy because I mean it's almost nil that your karya for these vibhaktis will be something different. Tritiya, Chaturthi, Panchami, Shashti, Saptami, kadachit kaschid visheshah syat. Kintu prayena एतेषु सर्वेषु अपि समानरीत्या एव कार्यं भवति. एवमेव भ्याम् इत्यत्र यद् भवति सामान्यतः तदेव सर्वत्र परसंज्ञायां भवति. अत्र आदौ द्वितीय रूपे अर्थात् द्विवचने यद् भवति तदेव अन्यत्र सर्वनामस्थाने. Right? So as we came to the end of this, there are basically 4 forms that you should concentrate. Su, au, and then ta and bhyam. So one representative of each, if we know, in 95% of halanta shabdas tadeva bhavati. Anyatra kevalam pratyaya bhedah bhavati, kintu surya sutrani karyani sarvam api samana ritya bhavati. Atra एवमेव पश्यामः चेत् वस्तुतः अत्र भसंज्ञा निमित्तं किमपि कार्यं नास्ति, केवलं वर्णमेलनम् अस्ति. सर्वनामस्थाने अपि कोऽपि विशेषः नास्ति. सुप्रत्यये एवं पदान्ते, सुप्रत्ययः तत्र लोपे तत्र समानं कार्यं भवति, तावदेव. So the most complex is where you have 4 variations, but in many cases some of those will get eliminated and we are left with lesser variations in the halanta shabdas. Atah tat manasi nidhaya vayam chintayamah chet. So if we can train ourselves to think of halanta shabdas in those 4 blocks, it is much easier to remember. तत्र आदौ हकारान्त शब्दाः सन्ति, तत्र मुख्यं कार्यमस्ति होढः इति. पदान्ते हकारस्य ढकारादेशः भवति इति सूत्रार्थः. सुप्रत्यये आदौ हल्न्यादिना सुलोपः भवति. हकारः पदान्ते अस्ति, तत्र ढत्वे कृते जष्ट्वं भवति, विकल्पेन चर्त्वं भवति. लिट् लिड्, लिड्भ्यां लिड्भिः लिट्सु सर्वत्रापि समानम्. तत्र सुप्रत्यये पुनः यत्र डकारः श्रूयते तत्र डसि धुट् इत्यनेन विकल्पेन धुडागमः भवति. So this is the utsarga general template for hakarantas. Atra hakaraha dhatau asti va avyutpanna shabde asti va kimapi napekshitam. It does not matter. As long as you have a hakara, without needing to know other details, we can apply hodhaha. Agre yada vayam apavada sutrani pashyamaha tatra vishesha nimittam bhavati dhatoho bhavet ityadi. Atra tu nasti. Padante athava jhalipare, jhalparakatvam subanta prakarane nasti. अतः पदान्ते हकारस्य ढकारादेशः भवति इत्येव सूत्रार्थः. एवमेव बहवः शब्दाः उत्पादयितुं शक्यन्ते. सो भूमौ रोहति इति भूरुः, भूरुट् भूरुहौ भूरुहः. एवं मधुलिट् मधुलिहौ मधुलिहः इत्यादि. So then we saw the first exception to the normal pattern, which is the duh shabda. So duh is derived from the dhatu. So this is again something which a lot of people asked. So when we are deriving from the dhatu, now it is a pratipadika. So is it still a dhatu was a question. See, the thing is, we start off with the duh as the dhatu. Like say in pathati itself, you have patha, you have a and ti. Patha is a dhatu. Patha, you have the vikarana, and then pathati is a tinganta pada. Okay. But as a part of it, when you have that patha, that will still be a dhatu, right? That the dhatu property is one of the properties which is like inherited throughout whatever forms you do. That is why when we look at the Samskrita Shabdas, 80 or even 90% of them, we trace them back to the dhatus. That dhatu samya for that particular portion is not lost. Even when you look at Ramaha, that Ramu part of it is identified as a dhatu. Particularly, but what happens is usually once you add a pratyaya to the dhatu, that pratyayanta becomes a pratipadika and that will take precedence. Further operating on the dhatu core of it may not be there. But in kvibantas, we have seen earlier, kvibantas are unique words where there is no change at all. So this duh was initially a dhatu, right? So we know how it is derived. So I hope it should be clearer now. Okay. So we have this duha prapurane, which is a dhatu by bhuvadayo dhatavaha. Then what we did is we added the kvip pratyaya to this dhatu. So duh plus the kvip. Okay. Now this duh plus kvip, this samudaya is a kridanta. Because it is a kridanta, it is a pratipadika, right? But within this, we still have duh as the dhatu. So the dhatu identity is there, and kvip is a pratyaya. The pratyaya identity is there. And on the whole part of it, we are also giving a new identity, which is called the pratipadikam. Right? Now, when we are taking away this kvip, adarshanam lopaha, since kvip is not there, there is no entity which has pratyaya, but both these entities still remain. The pratipadika samya, even though the kvip is lost, the pratyaya lakshana is there, so duh is a pratipadika, but just the duh part of it also retains its dhatu identity. They are not mutually opposing. That is, the pratipadika samya does not cancel out the dhatu samya or something. Right? So whatever karyas are given for a dhatu, if a shabda is derived from the dhatu, to the dhatu part, we can still operate based on the dhatu samya. Okay. So duh is a dhatu. That is why we have the new sutra which says dader dhator ghaha. Right? So dader dhator ghaha is an apavada to hodhaha, which says if the hakara belongs to a dhatu beginning with dakara. So at the beginning of the dhatu, we need to have a dakara, and at the end of the dhatu, we need to have the hakara. So hakaranta and dakaradi dhatus. So you can go to Ashtadhyayi website and do a filter. So which are the dhatus which have dakara at the beginning and hakara at the end? You will get a list. It's not a big list, some 8 or 10 dhatus. You have dah, you have dih, you have duh, you have druh, so on. So etesham dhatunam kim bhavati? Instead of dhatva, we have the ghatva, kavarga chaturtha varna as the adesha. That is actually the only special adesha depending on the dakaradi dhatu. Now, when we have the ghakara, this portion, so the dugh part of it, it gets a jhashantatva, because of which a new sutra, ekacho bashobha jhashantasya dhoho, kicks in, and the dakara is converted to dhakara. So we have a Vagvardhini question on this sutra. And if we get there, the Jnanavardhini is also based on this sutra. So I'm not going into much detail. The basic meaning is that the end should be a Mahaprana, that is bha, gha, dha, dha. And at the beginning, you have the third letter of the Varga that gets converted to the fourth letter. The transformation is fairly simple. The sutra is, the interpretation needs some effort to understand. That's all. Right? So then the Jashtva, Chartva, they are all the same. And all these karyas again happen at padanta. Bhasamnyayaha va sarvanamastana samnyayaha va kimapi patram atra nasti. Right? So at the end you have duh and su. Dader dhatorghaha ityanena ghatvam bhavati dugh su. Ekacho basho bhash jhashantasya dhoho iti bhash bhavah bhavati dhugh su. Then you have jhalam jashonte dhug su. Then adesha pratyayoho and finally kharicha. Please remember we are operating entirely in Tripadi. So please pay attention to the order where we are. Right. So Dader Dhatorghaha is 32, 8 to 32. Then you have Ekacho Bashobhash, further there 36 or something. Then Jashtva is 39. Then Shatva is in third pada. Chartva is in fourth pada. Even if you don't remember the exact sutra numbers, a mental map of where what is. For example, so in the you have 8-2, 8-3, 8-4, right? So 8-2 before Jashtva, there should be something. What is all happening before Jashtva? So all these Hakara Karyas are happening before Jashtva. Then you have Jashtva. Then you will have Sasajasho, Ruhu and related Karyas. All of these are in 8-2. 8-3 at the beginning we have the Rutva, Naschavya, Prashan, etc., which we have already studied. Then Visarga and Visarga modifications are all there in third pada. At the end you have the Adhikara called Apadantasya Murdhanyaha, which covers all the Shatva. Right? So all that is in 8-3. When we come to 8-4, it starts with Natva and then all the Hal Sandhis. So some major blocks, if you remember, try to apply them in the same order. Okay. Some cases it may not make a difference. Some cases it will. Okay. So it is always better to follow that order. For example, in the final step, you have Dhug and Su. You can do Chartva, Dhuk, Su and still do Adesha Pratyayoho. It doesn't matter because it is still the Kavarga. But according to the Sutra Krama, Adesha Pratyayoho will apply first and then Kharicha will apply. Right. How is Guh declined like Lih is a question. It's a hypothetical question. If we have a dhatu like Guh, it will have Hodhaha, but it will also have Ekacho Bashobhash, right? Because you have Gudh, right? So there is a Bash Varna, G will get converted to Ghakar, right? So it will be like a Ghut, Guhau, Guhaha. So the ending is like Lih, whereas the beginning, that is the Bhashbhava, will also happen for Guh. Okay. Even for Lih, the dhatu part will be there, right? Yes, Lih is also a dhatu. We are not just doing anything depending on the dhatu. Lih iti shabdepi dhatutvam astyeva. Lih ityasya dhatutvam asti. Okay. Is there an option to use jhalam jash jhashi in Lih bhyam? Jhalam jash jhashi is 8-4. It is asiddha. So if it is padanta, it is always jhalam jashonte which will operate, right? Because it doesn't recognize jhalam jash jhashi. So 8-2-39 and 8-4 somewhere. So jhalam jash jhashi, hypothetically it is possible that jhalam jash jhashi also applies in lidhubhyam, but since it is asiddha, you have to convert it using jhalam jashonte. Dader dhatorghaha atra dadi ityatra dakaraha eva grihyate va takaraha ghakaraha. It is only dakara. Please remember, in all vyanjanas, each vyanjana will represent only itself. Okay, they are more selfish, unlike swara. Swara, whenever you say a, by default, it will represent everybody, and you have to make a special effort to restrict it to only hrasva. But in vyanjanas, any vyanjana will always stand only for itself. You have to make it the udit, ku, chu, tu, tu, pu, which is again allowed only with the first varna. So only with udit can you represent other vyanjanas of the varga. Otherwise, each vyanjana will represent only that vyanjana. The means the only, not tatha, not dha. Alpaprana, Mahaprana, all of them are different. Okay, they are all individuals. Only in the special case of Udit, they are brought in together as a family. Okay. Okay, so there are some questions about Ekacho, Bashobhash, which we will take, as I said, later. There is Vagvardhini and Jnanavardhini on the same sutra. Next, we will move on to the third exception, which was the Druh Dhatu. Now, Druh Dhatu, the moment you see, it is a combination of both, right? So, that is, it is a Dakaradi Dhatu, but what happens is there's a special sutra which says Va Druha Muha Shnuha Shniham. So, in the absence of this sutra, this Shabda should have been actually like Duhu Shabda, because it is Hakaranta, it is Dakaradi. So, by their Dhatorghaha, it should have been exactly like Duhu Shabda. But because Va Druha Muha Shnuha Shniham gives Ghatva optionally. Okay. There is another case where Hodhaha will come back. Okay. So this is one thing which I wanted to also clarify at some point, because when I was evaluating the exam papers, like say Purve Purvaha, wherever there are Vikalpa forms, there was quite a bit of confusion on what should be written first, what should be written later. Right? And a lot of people had written it the reverse. So while it's not a very big thing, see, the problem is whenever there is a Vikalpa, we have to understand which sutra is allowing the Vikalpa, and that Vikalpa sutra has to come first before you take a fork. Okay, in the sutra prakriya krama, what happens is usually it is just going on the same way. Okay, you don't have a choice. You just have to do one thing after the other and keep going. Okay, they are not allowed to deviate. If there is a fork, that fork can be created only by using a Vikalpa Sutra. Okay, so if we are getting to two forms, there should always be a sutra which allows the Vikalpa. And in such case, that sutra has to come first. Okay, for example, in this case, when I am writing, say, the Prakriya for Druh Dhatu, I start with Druh Dhatu. If I apply Hodhaha directly, you will get only one form. You cannot get to Va Druha Muha Shnuha Shniham later. Why? Hodhaha is not allowing you an option. The moment you do Hodhaha, it will simply convert Hakara fully to Dhakara. It does not give you an option. So you cannot do Hodhaha first and then show Ghatva. It is conceptually wrong. Kim karaniyam adau va druha muha shnuha shniham ityanena ghatvam eva pradarshaniyam. You have to show Ghatva first. Excuse me, let me just maybe open the presentation where we have the actual prakriya. So the Ghatva has to come first. You have to show that there is an optional sutra which is allowing you to get to the fork, and then only you can show the other form. So halnyadina sulopaha bhavati, right? So there is only one track now. If you see here again, so you can see that you start with the Druh Shabda. So it goes straight. There is no fork. There is only one thing which can happen, which is Halgyabhyo. right? Then again, when you come to drugh, because the sutra says va druha muhashnuhashniham, it is saying I will not apply optionally. I will give you another case which I will not touch. So what druha muhashnuhashniham is saying is, I will convert half of it, that is one portion of it, to ghakara, but I will provide a fork. What to do in this fork is what you have to go back and decide. What will happen in this fork is, now hodhaha comes in, it sees that okay, there is a free hakara, so now hodhaha can convert it to dhakara, right? If hodhaha comes in right here, if hodhaha looks at druh, what does it see? It sees that there is hakara at padanta, but it is a dadi dhatu. All sutras have to give way for the apavada. Dader dhatorghaha is an apavada, so hodhaha will not act at this stage directly. It will act only when it has got a free option. Dader dhatorghaha in turn is prevented by va druha muhashnuhashniham. When there is an option, hodhaha can act. Therefore, while representing the prakriya also, writing hodhaha first, even though there are 4 forms, giving the dhatva forms first is wrong. You have to give the ghatva. That is why he clearly gives that. Dhruk, dhrug. First thing is, you have to give the specific apavada. Va druha muhashnuhashniham, you get dhruk, dhrug. Because this is allowing another option, then we say ghatva abhave eva dhatvam. If we directly apply dhatva, you don't have an option. Hodhaha doesn't say I am optional. It will say I'll simply convert it. You cannot go to the other route. Okay, so it's almost like some routes allow you to branch out, some routes do not. So when writing prakriya, you have to see which is the route that is allowing the fork. Put that first and then you can take the fork. You cannot put a Nitya Sutra first and then go to an Apavada. Is that clear? It's a mistake which I saw lots of papers. I didn't cut mark. I didn't take that. Kintu uchyate. Sarvadapi tathaiva abhyasaha karaniyah. Okay, tatra yatha purve purvaha ityasti athava purvasmat purvad ityasti. Adau purvat iti nochyate. Adau kimasti tatra पूर्वपरावर दक्षिणोत्तरापराधाराणि व्यवस्थायाम असंज्ञायाम इत्यनेन विकल्पेन सर्वनाम संज्ञा भवति. That has to come first. What is it that is allowing you to take 2 paths? So then सर्वनाम संज्ञा पक्षे जसषि आद्गुणः सर्वे इति रूपम. सर्वनाम संज्ञायाः अभावे. How did you get to that abhava? You have to mention saying because of the purvaparavara. Okay. So you cannot say, for example, purva and just directly you write pratamayo purva savarnaha and then rutva visarga purvaha. Where in your arm did you get the option? You haven't shown the option at all. How do you branch out later is a question. Sarvada yatra yatra vikalpaha asti tatra adau vikalpaha eva bhavet. Can we say va druha muhashnuhashniham is an apavada of hodhaha? It is a badhaka of both hodhaha and dader dhatorghaha, but it is not a nitya badhaka, it is a vikalpena badhaka. It optionally blocks both dader dhatorghaha and hodhaha. That is, in case of druh, it blocks dader dhatorghaha. In case of the rest, it blocks hodhaha. Okay, so we'll go back. Sorry. So druhu shabdaha, I think now this is clear. In Saptami, there are 2 forks. One is ghatva, घत्वे कृते भष्भावः भवति जष्ट्वं शत्वं चर्त्वम् एकमेव रूपं भवति धृक्षु तदभावे यदा ढत्वं क्रियते तदा तत्र धुड् विकल्पः भवति अतः रूपद्वयम् you have dhrutsu and dhrutsu two forms there again you have to show dasi dhut first optional this show dhrutsu then dhudagamasya abhave you have kharicha अन्तिमः शब्दः प्रथमसप्ताहे अधीतः विश्ववाः इति अस्य पदान्ते विशेषः नास्ति सर्वत्रापि हकारः अस्ति इत्यतः होढः इत्यनेन ढत्वं भवति जष्ट्वं चर्त्वम् इत्यादि भवति भसंज्ञायां विशिष्टं सूत्रमस्ति वाहः ऊठ् भवति संप्रसारण संज्ञा. So we saw this occasion to understand samprasarana, which is reverse of yan. So y, v, r, l being replaced by e, u, r, l is called samprasarana. Normally what happens is just when he says samprasarana, he doesn't specify a samprasarana. If it says vahaha, it means vakara would automatically get replaced by ukara. So samprasarana would just replace it with u. But in this particular case, we need to distinguish this ukara because we want vriddhi only when there has been samprasarana. It is only in the context of ut. That is why he gives a special samprasarana called ut. And that is used in etyedhatyutsu. So we have vriddhi everywhere. Vishvauha, vishvauhe ityadi. Also another thing we saw was samprasarana is only for the end letter. But the moment we do samprasarana, there is purva rupa, that ik letter which has come. It will undergo an ekadesha with the following ach so that it is finally only the samprasarana that is heard. The swara after the samprasarana will not be heard. Okay. So I think that's it. Any questions? Otherwise we can start with. Okay. So prathamamha prashnah asti ekach iti padarthasya vivaranam iti. ये वक्तुमिच्छन्ति हस्तमुन्नयन्तु. प्रवीणा.
नमस्ते भगिनी.
हाँ.
एकाच पदार्थ विवरणम्. एकाच इत्युक्ते एकः अचः यस्य सः समुदायः. वर्णानां समुदायः पार्श्वे एकः अच् भवितुम् अर्हति. एकः अच् तस्य पूर्वतः परतः अव्यवहिताः हल् वर्णाः सन्ति. तेषाम् अपि परिगणना एकाच धातु अव्यय मध्ये भवति. यथा स्पर्ध स प अ रथ. यदा को अपि शब्दः मध्ये अनेकाः एकाच अवयवाः सन्ति तदा कथं गणनीयम् इति पश्यामः. उदाहरणम् अस्ति चिकीर्ष. अत्र च इक इरश अ त्रयः अचः सन्ति. ह्रस्व ईकारस्य एकाच अव्यय च इक इति भवति. दीर्घ ईकारस्य एकाच अवयव क इरश इति तथा अंतिम अकारस्य रश अ इति एकाच. अतः अच वर्णस्य द्वयो पार्श्वे अव्यवहिताः हल् वर्णाः सन्ति. तान् परिगण्य एकाच समुदायस्य निर्माणं भवति. इत्युक्ते पूर्वं ये हल् वर्णाः तथा अनन्तरं यच् पर्यन्तं यावन्तः हल् वर्णाः सन्ति तेषां सर्वेषाम् अपि तत्र अंतर्भावः क्रियते. समाप्तम्. Is it okay?
हा, सूत्रविषये अपि सम्यगेव पदार्थः विवृतः, किन्तु सामान्यतः तत्र सूत्रे कथं तस्य अन्वयः इति वक्तुं शक्नोति वा?
एकाच
कस्मिन् सूत्रे उपयुज्यते, तत्र कथं?
एकाच बशो भश् चषन्तस्य स्तुवोः एकाच तत्र अस्मिन् सूत्रे झषन्तस्य अव्ययः भवितुम् अर्हति. तथा बश् वर्ण तत्र कुत्रापि भवितुम् अर्हति. तदा एकाच धातु अवयवस्य बश् वर्णस्य बश् भाव भवति.
सो एकाच अवयवस्य तत्र परिगणनं क्रियते सूत्रे. धन्यवादः, सम्यक् उक्तं, पदार्थविवरणम् उक्तं सम्यक्. एकाचो बशो भष् झषन्तस्य स्तुवोः. So ekach in this sutra, and when we again come to Tingantas, there is a sutra called Ekacho Dve Prathamasya and Ajader Dvitiyasya. So there again we see this concept of ekach. Tatra dvitvam yada kriyate dhatushu litlakare va sannanteshu va tatra ekachah dvitvam bhavati ityeva arthah bhavati. So ekach is basically a paribhashika pada in Vyakarana, which we need to understand. So ekaha ach yasya saha. It is a bahuvrihi samasa. In this context, please remember, it is not a universal definition of ekach. We have already seen, where did we see that? Ekoj nipatah, ekach, nipata ekajanang. In pragrihya samnya, we saw ekach, the shabda ekach, where we just said ekaj rupaha. There the ekach meant only a single ach. I don't know if you remember. We saw in the sandhis in the first part. So there was a sutra nipata ekajanang, which said an ekach nipata is pragrihya. So there we said ekach means a single ach. That's all. Like a, e, u, e indraha, u umeshaha, etc. were the examples given there. Right? So when you have ekach there, the samasa itself is different. We always know samasasya vivakshanugunam tatra vigraha bhavitum arhati. Tatra tu ekaha ach iti karmadharaya samasaha. But in this context and in the context of ekachodve prathamasya, it is ekaha ach yasya saha iti bahuvrihi samasaha. So the intention is there is a bigger samudaya, a group of letters of which we are taking one ekach component. We are taking some component which has a single ach. Right? So when it says there should be only one ach, it does not restrict how many vyanjanas there should be. There can be vyanjanas either before the ach or after the ach. As she said, immediately before or after the ach till you reach another ach. It is as if like they are maintaining a territory. Right? You have one ach here. Right, so you have one ach, say prathamaha ach atra asti. Then you have dvitiyaha ach. Right. So then in between you can have any number of hal. Right. I mean, just hypothetically you can have some before, some in between, and some later. So what this one says is basically the ekach can extend. Okay, so the territory or the kingdom of one ach, it basically can extend till it meets another ach, right? So this ach can claim all consonants before and after. So till it is prevented by this ach. But this ach can also claim these ones. So there can be some overlap. Okay, when we are counting the ekats, how many ekats? So each ach has a territory, but it may be an overlapping territory. It usually does not make any difference to Vyakarana. Right? It's basically you will either take this ekach or you will take this ekach. There are no contexts where there is a fight and we have to decide whether this goes to this ach or not. All that does not really matter. Okay, so it is fine. So for the purposes for which we need it, an ekach is basically an ach surrounded by any consonants till it meets another ach. So if a particle happens to have only one ach, then the whole thing will be there. So that is the meaning of ekach. Ekaha ach yasya saha iti vigrahaha bahuvrihi samasaha. Samudayah, varna samudayah yasmin ekaha ach vidyate. Sayeva asya arthaha.
भगिनी एक प्रश्न अस्ति निमित्त कारणे चेक पॉइंट एग्जाम मध्ये अस्ति भष भाव प्रवृत्ति अर्थम एतेषु किं किं निमित्तम् अहम एक पदान्तं सकार द्व शब्द परत्वक पदान्तं अहम जानामि किंतु धातु अव्यय एकाच समुदाय तु स्थानी कृते अस्ति वा
स्थानी तु अत्र बश् एव अस्ति बशः भष् the sthani is only bash. Directly when we say sthani, so sthani is directly that which is replaced. So here the adesha is not for the ekach dhatva vayava. It is not for the jhashanta samudaya. It is for the bash. Direct sthani in this sutra is bash. Bashah sthane bhash bhavati. All other conditions are nimitta in general. See, when we say nimitta, there is purva nimitta, there is paranimitta, which is like saptami and panchami. But in general, any other conditions like this, where basically we have not the sthana shashti, but the avayava shashti. Right. So, ekachaha bash. So, ekach is one samudaya which has to be present, but it is not directly replaced. It is only a bash which is directly replaced. Right. So, that is why when we saw the diagram also in that this one, that is what I was trying to represent when I put sort of convoluted diagram maybe. But
अन्य अस्ति झषन्तस्य एकाच समुदाय
so all this, the sthani directly is only bash. Everything else is only a condition or nimitta.
But when I saw the diagram, there is three words, dve, se dve padante, and this samudaya, ekach samudaya, the orange bracket madhya asti.
Satyameva. Right. Your confusion is right. It should be there, and the question was also to clarify that. The question in this one, that it is the sthani here is not the jhashanta ekach dhatvavayavasya ekachaha jhashantasya bashaha bhash. Finally, bash is replaced by bhash is the sutrartha. Sthani bash asti.
अस्तु भगिनी, धन्यवादः.
Okay. So यदा इदानीम् एकाच धातवः सन्ति यथा दृष्टम् अस्माभिः पठ वन्द इत्यादि. So there is only one ekach. There is no scope for any confusion there. When there are anekach dhatus, then there will be multiple ekach samudayas in there. So that is what we saw here. So chikirsha is an anekach dhatu. So in that case, there is the possibility that there are, so as we saw, there is ch, e, right? Then you have k, e, r, sh, a, right? So the core here is there are three achs which can have their own territory. All right. So this e will claim whatever comes before and after. So chik is one ekach. Now this e will also claim this kakara partially and repha and shakara. It won't stop till it sees another ach as the competitor. Okay. So this is the second ekach. And again, so if you look this akara, it doesn't have anything coming after, but it will claim the repha and shakara. So we have three ekach particles here. One is chik. Chik is a chakaradi kakaranta ekach samudaya. Now this kirsh, k, e, r, sh is a shakaranta ekach samudaya. And this r, sh, a is an akaranta ekach samudaya. That's all. We are just saying there are three ekach particles here. Now the ekacho basho bhash will kick in if it sees that any of these ekach samudaya is jhashanta. So the first thing it sees is there any ekach group which is ending in jhashanta, right? Jhash letter, which is jha, jhabhai and ghadha dhash, right? Jhabha, ghadha, dha. That is all it needs. Ekaha ach. Are these kinds of shabdas pullingas? It doesn't matter, but yes, usually the ach, hal, varna, because we are making it as a visheshana to the varnaha, we use it as pullingas. The bash can be anywhere. Yes, it can be anywhere within that ekach samudaya. It can be at the beginning, it can be somewhere in between, etc. So what does this ekacho basho bhash say? It says, if you find, one second, let me. So what it says, so always we need to have a example. So if you find, right, an ekach samudaya, right, say duh is an ekach samudaya, but it is not jhashanta. So it keeps on adding conditions. Says it needs to be an ekach samudaya which has a bash letter, which is dakara. So right at the beginning you have it, right? Duh, the dhatu itself, there is an ekach and there is bash. But what it also needs is two other things. One is jhashanta and the other is padantatva. So the moment you delete the su, duhu su, supratyayasya lope krite, you got the padanta. But you still don't have a jhashanta. There is hakara at the end of it. The moment you convert this hakara to a jhash letter, right? Say in case of duh, I convert it into ghakara because of dader dhator ghaha. But it need not always be ghakara. As we saw, if say there was somebody who asked about guh dhatu, right? In guh dhatu also we have a bash letter. We have an ekach samudaya. There is padanta. Here using hodhaha, I convert this to dhakara. Okay. So whenever this conversion happens, either hodhaha or dader dhatorghaha, now the conditions for ekacho basho bhash are ripe. There is padanta, there is a jhash letter at the end, and there is a bash letter. So the bash is converted to bhash, which is the mahaprana of the same kind, which is dhu. So dakarasya sthane dhakaraha bhavati. Gakaraha asti chet gakarasya sthane ghakaraha bhavati. Bakaraha asti chet. We have cases like budh, right? The budh dhatu, the dhatu itself has the dhakara, which is a jhashanta, right? So ba will be converted by bhakara, etc. Can you please give example of aneka chavayava dhatu with jhashanta? So that is what I think we saw that in Gardabh, right? See, this is where that is exactly why he gives this example is also in the Siddhanta Kaumudi, which I thought we could discuss in Vagvardhini. So you have Gardabh, right? So Gardabh is an artificial dhatu, right? It's not the Aupadeshika dhatu. So Gardabham ichhati or Gardabhaha iva acharati ityarthe. So you're converting Gardabha to a Nama dhatu, and then you're again adding quip to come back to Kridanta. So we have Gardabh as the Pratipadika. Okay, so let's not get into this one. Now this is a Pratipadika derived from dhatu. Just like Duh is a dhatu, this one is also a dhatu, and this is Jhashanta. Okay, so this being Jhashanta, if we do the Supratyaya and delete it, we can apply Ekacho Basho Bhash Jhashantasya Stvoho. If you directly say the dhatu itself should be ekach, this does not qualify, right? Because the dhatu here is not ekach, it is an anekach dhatu. So I cannot say for an ekach dhatu, I will convert, right? So here what I do is I take only the ekach part which is related to this akara. There are two akaras there, A1 and A2. So A1 will have the ekach, which is gard, is one ekach samudaya, whereas the second akara has the ekach samudaya as rdabh. Right? Now this ekach samudaya is jhashanta and it has a bash. As you can see, again, it need not be at the beginning. There is a dakara at in as a part of the jhashanta ekach samudaya. So the dakara will be converted to dhakara. So you get the form gardhap. So gardhap is basically a person who desires a donkey or who is acting like a donkey. Gardabhaiva acharati, if you say. So it can be used as a good word to scold somebody. It also has that forceful sound. Like you would say stupid or something, you can use Gardha. In case of multiple ekach, will any ekach get the bhashadesha? No, it will not. It has to be the ekach which is at padanta or which is followed by sakara, dhakara, etc. So it is usually the one which is closest to the pratyaya. And also the first ekach, we don't have examples where this will be a jhashanta maybe and has a bhash. But you will still need it to be padanta, right? So you don't have that padanta somewhere in between. Okay. So we will move ahead. The next one, anybody wants to take this? Dhatvadehe shakarasya sakara vidhanam tasya prayojanani. Hema Sridhar.
नमस्कारः भगिनी।
हा।
धात्वादेः शकारस्य सकारविधानं तस्य प्रयोजनानि। धातोः औपदेशिक अवस्थायां यदि आदिमवर्णः शकारः वर्तते तर्हि धात्वादेः शहसः धात्वादेशस् अनेन सूत्रेण शकारस्य सकारादेशः जायते। धातुपाठे बहवः धातवः एतादृशाः सन्ति यत्र आदिमवर्णः मूर्धन्यशकारः भवति। एतादृशानां धातूनाम् आदेः शकारः दृश्यते। प्रथमम् लोपः करणीयम्। अनुबन्धलोपानन्तरं प्रक्रियवेलायां शकारस्य सकारपरिवर्तनं करणीयम्। उदाहरणत्वेन शः अत्र मूर्धन्यशकारस्य सकारः भूत्वा सः इति धातुः निष्पद्यते। तथैव श्वद इत्यत्र स्वद् इति जायते। यश्वप् इत्यत्र स्वप् इति। परन्तु वयं सूत्रे वा द्रुह मुह श्नुह श्निहाम् इत्यत्रापि श्नुह श्निह इति धातुद्वयं दृष्टवन्तः, यत्र आदिमवर्णः शकारः अस्ति, तदनन्तरं नकारः दृश्यते। अत्र एतादृशेषु धातुषु मूलतः तत्र धातौ नकारः एव विद्यते इति मत्वा तत्र नकारस्य नकारः यदि विद्यते तर्हि तत्र णत्वनियमान् अनुसृत्य नकारस्य नकारः भवति। परन्तु इदं अस्य कार्यस्य कोऽपि निमित्तं न अपेक्ष्यते, अनैमित्तिकं कार्यम् अस्ति इति। शस्य यदा सूत्रेण निवृत्तिं कृत्वा सकारं कुर्मः तदा
सूत्रेण निवृत्तिः न भवति, सूत्रेण विधानमेव भवति। धात्वादेशः इत्यनेन शकारस्य स्थाने सकारः विधीयते।
हाँ, परन्तु णत्व
निवृत्तिः तु णत्वस्य भवति अथवा ष्टुत्वस्य भवति।
हाँ, तर्हि शस्य यदा सूत्रेण विधानं जायते अपि च सकारम् आयास्यति तदानीं णत्वनिवृत्तिरपि भवति, अपि च नकारः जायते इति। अत्र एका परिभाषा वर्तते, निमित्त अपाये नैमित्तिकस्य अपि अपायः इति परिभाषया शकारः यः निमित्तरूपेण आसीत्, येन युक्तनस्य नकारः जातः, एतादृशनिमित्ते नशिष्यमाणे सति नैमित्तिकस्यापि नाशः भवति इति परिभाषायाः तात्पर्यम्। अनेन शकारस्य सकारे जाते नकारस्य नकारः अभवत् इति। एतस्य कार्यस्य प्रयोजनं किम् इति प्रश्ने सति शोपदेशधातुषु प्रयोजनं षत्वप्रकरणमेव भवति इति। अत्र षत्वप्रकरणम् इत्युक्ते अत्र वयम् आदेशप्रत्ययोः इति वयं परिचितसूत्रं वर्तते। इण्कोः वर्णानां परे यदि सकारः आदेशरूपेण वा प्रत्ययस्य अवयवरूपेण वा विहितः तर्हि स च सकारः शकारः भवति। इण् इत्युक्ते अत्र परनकार स्वीकार्यम् इति मनसि भवेत् इति। अत्र दृष्टान्तत्वेन रामेषु इति वयं रामशब्दे अपि दृष्टवन्तः। तत्र रामयोगः सुप् अत्र बहुवचने जल्येत इति एत्वं कृत्वा रामे योगः सुप् इति स्थिते अत्र सकारः तु प्रत्ययस्य अवयवः, अपि च तस्मात् प्राक् एकारः वर्तते। स च एकारः इण्को मध्ये अन्तर्भूतः अस्ति। तर्हि इदानीं निमित्ते पूरिते सत्वस्य षत्वं भूत्वा रामेषु इति निष्पद्यते। तथैव वाक्षु इत्यत्रापि सन्धिकार्याणि अपि भवति। तत्र वाच् शब्दे सुप् मध्ये तत्र चोः कुः इत्यनेन ककारः भूत्वा तदनन्तरं ककारः इङ्को वर्णः इति कृत्वा तत्रापि षत्वं भूत्वा वाक्षु इति रूपम् आयास्यति। तावदेव लिखितवती भगिनि।
अत्र किमर्थं किन्तु तस्य अस्य च कः सम्बन्धः? तत्र तु अस्माभिः धात्वादेशः सः इति न कृतं किल, तद्विनापि आदेशप्रत्ययोः इति भवत्येव। अस्य सूत्रस्य किं प्रयोजनं?
केवलं तत्र सूत्रस्य इण्को वर्णस्य विवरणार्थे तत्र
अवगतं, किन्तु अस्य प्रयोजनं किम्?
सकारस्य षत्वविधानमेव खलु।
न, किमर्थं सकारः एव न स्वीक्रियते? आदौ एव सकारः भवति चेत् किमर्थं धातुः शः इति उक्तः पाणिनिना? सः धातुः इत्येव किमर्थं नोक्तः? शः वा सिच् वा किमपि भवतु, सिच् धातुः अस्ति, साक्षात् यथा इदानीं स्पर्ध धातुः अस्ति, साक्षात् सकारः एव श्रूयते, सिच् इत्येव धातुं कर्तुं शक्नोति किल। किमर्थं तत्र शकारः अस्ति इति उक्त्वा शकारस्य स्थाने सकारः one step extra? Why don't we directly take sich as the dhatu?
भवती एव समाधानं वदतु भगिनि। न स्फुरति किमपि इदानीं।
चिन्ता नास्ति, अन्ये केऽपि वक्तुं शक्नुवन्ति वा? बिन्दु केवलं तस्य प्रश्नस्य why do we have to make it sh and then convert it to sakara? किमर्थम् आदौ एव सकारः एव नोक्तः?
तत्र उपदेशे इति तत्र मूले एव पाणिनिना तत्र दत्तमस्ति रूपम्। अनन्तरं तत्र पश्यामः चेत् सि ते च इति उदाहरणं पश्यामः। तत्र इन् वर्णः अस्ति, सकारस्य इन् वर्णः अस्ति, ते च इति तत्र आदेशभूतस्य सकारस्य प्रत्ययः नास्ति, अतः तत्र वयं शे च इति कर्तुं शक्नुमः।
सो सम्यक् उक्तं। तत्र किम् इत्युक्ते, if it was originally sakara, right? Say what I am saying is sich ityeva dhatuh bhavatu, मूले एव सकारः भवतु, किमर्थं शकारात् सकारः आनेतव्यः इति. If the original dhatu itself is sich, so at some point in lit lakara we get si sech, right? So in si sech I want to apply adesha pratyayo. The question why I am asking the question is, in any form you will never hear the shakara. If you take any form of the sicha dhatu, it is sinchati, asinchat, and so on, right? So the sakara itself is heard. So why not originally have sakara in the dhatu itself? Why am I saying putting the dhatu as a shich and then converting it to sich is the question. Why do you add this extra step? They put a sakara, convert it to sakara, and then use it. Why not make the dhatu itself sich? What is the problem? So the problem is, say for example in si, sech, a, which is a lit lakara form. Okay. Now I want to, the actual form we need, shishta prayoga is sishecha, right? We need a shakara on this sakara, which I want to bring in using adesha pratyayoho. That is the easiest way. If I can apply adesha pratyayoho, it is easy. Otherwise, I have to create some new sutra to bring in the shatva. Now, can I apply adesha pratyayoho? Adesha pratyayoho has two major conditions. So there is also the apadantasya, which is okay. There is no padanta here. One is in or kavarga, right? So it should be in or kavarga, in kavargabhyam, in kubhyam parasya, which is there. The second condition is adesha pratyayayoho. The sakara should either belong to a pratyaya or be an adesha. Rameshu supratyaye sarvatrapi pratyayah asti. So we don't have a problem. Sup, the pratyaya originally is sakara, it's okay. It is a pratyayavayava. But here it is not a pratyayavayava and not an adesha. Assuming this is not there. If the dhatu was originally sich, what is the problem is this is neither adesha nor pratyayavayava. So I cannot apply adesha pratyayayoho. So I have to create a new rule. When I say I mean Panini. That is what Panini thinks. He has to create a new rule to say there will be shakara. Instead, and it would have to be multiple rules because Shatva is multiple cases. It is not just one sutra. He has created a new sutra here. But this one conversion of making sakara and adesha. What is Dhatvadesha Saha doing? It is saying the sakara is not original. It is an adesha, gold plated. And gold plated does work many cases because we don't want it's much cheaper. So for Vyakarana process, this gold plating this as an adesha is cheaper because it helps him avoid creating multiple sutras. In multiple Shatva sutras, one is adesha pratyayoho, then if you need shopadesha. So there are cases where it works for him to convert it back to shakara under appropriate conditions. So we don't see the prayojana of dhatvadesha saha sarvatra prayojanam na drishyate, kintu bahutra prayojanam drishyate. Okay.
So this prayojanam is seen generally in Tinganta Prakarane.
Yeah, because we're talking about dhatus mostly in Tinganta, not in Subha.
And wherever there is duplication, Dvitva Prakarane bhavati va?
Not necessarily there, even with the upasargas and all that. The whole of Shatva Prakarana. So in general, we can say that it is useful for Shatva Prakarana to convert the sakara back to shakara whenever the conditions are satisfied.
Dhanyavada.
So very quickly, Sutram tadarthaha uktaha udaharanani vaktavyani anaimittikam karyam. So as she mentioned, first we do the itsamya and then it does not need any other nimitta, whatever pratyaya, lakara, nothing. Just you can convert the shakara to sakara and then start with adding whatever pratyaya, etc. Shopadeshasya prayojanam api idanim uktam tasya adeshatvam bhavati sakarasya atah shatvam sambhavati iti prayojanam drashtam. Shtutva natva nivrittihi. So this is, I think, another thing which some people had a question or a doubt about. So what we are understanding is, see, what is the dhatu patha, right? How did Panini, so if you step back into Panini's shoes and look at the prayogas, how did he create the dhatu patha? So if you notice, right, the dhatus which are heard, say prayoge, if you look at pathati, apathat, pathet, etc., what you hear the common form is pat. Right? So similarly, when you do vandate, vandatam, etc., the common form you have is vand. Okay. So if we look at all the forms of, say, pachati, pakshyati, apachat, etc., the common form you will get it is pach. Right? So this is something which even us, we can do easily. Getting that pattern, the common pattern is very easy. Right? I mean, that is how we learn the language. There is a common factor in all these words which mean read, and that is path, vand, pach. Right? This is how we identify dhatus at a basic level. आरम्भिकस्तरे यदा धातुः उच्यते पठ धातुः वन्द् धातुः पच धातुः इत्येव उच्यते प्रौढशालास्तरेपि तदेव उच्यते किन्तु यदा धातुपाठं गत्वा पश्यामः तत्र किमस्ति इति यदा वयं चिन्तयामः अत्र पठ इत्यस्ति एकः अनुनासिकः अकारः योजितः अस्ति अत्र वन्द् एतत्तु कथञ्चित् अभिज्ञानं वा शक्यते किन्तु वन्द् इति यदा पश्यामः तदा मूलं यदा गत्वा पश्यामः तदा वदी इत्यस्ति so if I give vadi to any person who has no idea of vyakarana he will think it is a dhatu for say vadati sanskritam janati vyakaranam na janate he says okay maybe this is the dhatu for vadati there is no nakara here at all right and if you look at pach okay so the dhatu you will feel that it is like do pachash right so these are called the aupadeshika forms of the dhatus so patha vadi do pachash these are all the aupadeshika forms now all these forms are artificial when I say artificial or kritrima tatra prayoge kutrapi dupachati iti prayogaha na kriyate athava pachashti iti prayogaha na kriyate all these additional appendages which are there the do the the sha the e here the here they are never heard in prayoga prayoge kadapi na bhavati kritrimataya tatra paninina yojitaha kimartham yojitaha iti yada chintayamaha that is the beauty of Tinganta Prakarana. Okay, each of these additions has a purpose. Kevalam evameva keshuchit chalachitreshu to show some verbal this one. There was one clip which was circulating a few days ago where he used a Svaujasamotchash to great comical effect, some magical mantra. So Panini did not want to create any such magic. So it is not deliberately making it complicated. He is achieving multiple purposes through each of this conversion. So he is converting, he is taking what is the common factor of the dhatu and he is making some modifications keeping in mind his system. Ashtadhyayam yatha sutrani santi tatra keeping in mind all forms of pachadhatu. So just imagine how Panini should have created it. He has the entire form list of pachadhatu. He looks at it and he says, okay, what is the easiest way in which I can make sure all these are derived through my system? Okay. He adds some letters, he uses some shortcuts, and he comes up with the Aupadeshika forms. That is what we are guessing it happened. Whether Panini did it, whether somebody prior to him did it, all that is irrelevant. Let's assume it was Panini. He looked at Patha. He saw all forms of the dhatu. He brought out what is the common factor. Then he modified that common factor. He added several things to that to make sure that it works for his programming language, which is the Ashtadhyayi Sutras. That is why the Dhatu Patha is an appendix to the Ashtadhyayi. That Dhatu Patha works with Ashtadhyayi. If you remove the Ashtadhyayi, Dhatu Patha is meaningless. Why should it be Dupachash? It doesn't carry any meaning or purpose. The only reason for these Aupadeshika forms of Dhatus is to make sure some sutra operates correctly somewhere. Right? So in this process, when Panini was looking at some of the Dhatus, so he is analyzing all the forms and he sees that there are many Dhatus in which we hear the Sakara. Okay, so you have say Dhatus like you have, I'll just take two examples. We are running out of time. So I say I have Spardha Dhatu and then say I have Stha Dhatu. Okay. He saw two Dhatus and again all the Dhatus. There is Sakara here. So people like us, when I say Sthatum, Sthitva, etc., you see that Sakara and you see hear the Sakara in Spardhate, etc. we see only the common factor of sakara. But Panini noticed that there are forms like adhishthanam, etc., where this sakara gets converted to shakara, but this sakara does not. Okay, so first brilliance of Panini is seeing that these two, there is an essential difference. Even though both of them have sakara at the beginning, there is an essential difference between these two where there is some modification. So to help that modification, what Panini did was, he said, okay, I will make this as shakara, so that this shakara is then converted to sakara by dhatva saha. So normally we will hear the sakara, but wherever needed, I can convert it back to shakara easily. Right? So that is what he did. What he wanted to do was to make this sakara an adesha, he made it a shakara. But an unintended side effect of that was, the moment there is shakara here, you cannot pronounce this shakara and tha. It is phonetically a very, very bad combination. Shtunashtuhu is a nitya sutra. It's phonetically very difficult to pronounce murdhanya shakara with tavarga letters. So what happened was an unintended phonetic conversion where this thakara, when he tried to pronounce this dhatu, what he wanted to do was to say sh and tha. But because sandhi is a phonetic phenomenon, what he got was shtha. The moment you try to pronounce shakara and thakara gets converted to thakara, shtha. So he said, okay, let's have shtha as the dhatu. So this conversion is intentional, whereas this conversion happened naturally. So what we are saying is, we are only taking the intentional conversion of sa to sha. Panini resolved by bringing it back to sakara, right? By saying dhatvadesha saha, shakarasya sthane sakaraha vidhiyate. Tada kim bhavati shtutvam nivartate. This shtutva was not intentional. It just happened because the shakara is there. The thakara modified itself to thakara. It's like under force, under pressure, the thakara became thakara. The moment the pressure of shakara is removed, what happens is it gets back to thakara. It's like putting a gas, right? If you put a gas under high pressure, it changes into a liquid. But the moment you remove the pressure, it reverts back to its natural state. So the natural state was thakara. The moment you take away the force of shakara, thakara reverts to its original form. That is the meaning of tutva nivrittihi. Shakaram ashritya pravrittam shtutvam shakare nivratte swayam api nivartate. So we don't need a conscious effort to convert tha back to tha. We don't need an extra sutra. It automatically reverts. Similarly is the case with natva. Natva by rashabhyam nona samanapade. Again, due to the pressure of sha, na temporarily converts to na. The moment you remove the pressure, it reverts to its original state. That is meant by shtutva natva nivrattihi. The one question which many people had was, what if there was originally a shtut, the letter, the tavarga letter or an akara there? What if it was not a, the converted one? There was some letter which was originally that. It is not possible because in prayoga, see, this is a prayoga form. In prayoga, it is equally difficult to have a sakara and then have a tavarga letter or an akara there. Again, phonetically, it is not. So we don't have such a case. Wherever sakara is, it is followed by the nakara or tavarga, it is under force and it will revert when shakara is removed. Okay. Is this clear? अत्र बहूनां प्रश्नः आसीत् इत्यतः मया किञ्चित् विस्तरेण उक्तं किन्तु समयः अतीतः. Very sorry for extending this. Okay. So what I'll do is, there is one more question, but we have overshot our time. So we will continue this. Asya prashnasya agrima vagvardhinyam charcham kurmah. Okay. येनाक्षर समाम्नायम् अधिगम्य महेश्वरात् कृत्स्नं व्याकरणं प्रोक्तं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः. वाक्यकारं वररुचिं भाष्यकारं पतञ्जलिं पाणिनिं सूत्रकारं च प्रणतोऽस्मि मुनित्रयम्. नत्वा सरस्वतीं देवीं शुद्धां गुण्यां करोम्यहं पाणिनीयप्रवेशाय लघुसिद्धान्तकौमुदीम्. You can all leave, but if anybody has any questions specific to these, you can ask. I will still answer.